welcome to the Psych and Business Podcast, where we highlight the integration of psychology and psychological principles into the world of business and organizations. I'm your host, Dr. Ernest Wayde. All right, so I have another fantastic guest for you today. His name is Steven Schloss, and he is an executive and team coach. Now, Steven is a former operating executive and a two-time chief people officer. He is currently the founder and principal of Listen Forward Coaching and Leadership Advisory Practice, where he helps CEOs, C-suite executives, and teams strengthen individual and collective performance, deliver sustained results, and make a positive impact with and for the people they lead and the customers and communities they serve. Steven, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ernest. It's a pleasure to be here.
Steven, I'm really glad to have you here. And I know that you do so many other things. I know that you also, in addition to coaching, are also involved in growth equity firms. So tell us about your journey, Steven. How did you get where you are, and how are you doing all the things that you do?
Well, let's see. So to begin with, I'm a former, as you said, chief people officer. Actually, I was an HR executive for 3.5 decades. And
Wow.
I had the opportunity of working in a cross section of industries. I spent time, the first part of my career was in financial services and banking, both here and abroad, where I was an HR executive. And then I went into entertainment, publishing, and digital media, where I spent 13 years. I happened to be one of the lucky or unlucky people to have to navigate the integration of AOL and Time Warner, which is considered one of the great clusters of business mergers and acquisitions. But there was a great learning experience in the process where I was also in that world. I was a senior HR executive and also ran talent management at a corporate university. And then from there, I also spent time as a graduate faculty member at the New School in New York City, where I had gotten my master's, and then spent the following 12 to 14 years working as a chief people officer, both in the fast-growing world of tech and in the world of sports. And ultimately, the connection to my coaching life, I became a certified coach back in 2010, and over the years did a lot of pro bono coaching, especially in the world of social entrepreneurship. And it had always been my goal of going full-time into a coaching practice. And so ultimately what I did was part-time worked as a coach when we were actually right around this time 4 years ago, living through the world of operating remotely in COVID, leading me to take on an assignment with the partnership of a very well-known growth equity, private equity firm called Edison Partners, which is based in Nashville and Princeton. And it was there I became introduced to that world and have now since gone full time into my practice as of a little over 2 years ago, where my work really falls into 3 areas. I do coaching and advisory work for CEOs, C-level executives, and teams, non-private equity, but I also do the similar work through Edison Partners, working with companies in the portfolio, as well as future companies that the firm might be investing in. And so that blend of opportunity gives me a broad range of experiences and ways to help particularly leaders in fast-growing organizations. And I bring all of the experiences that come to bear from my multiple decades of leadership and operational expertise as part of the journey of helping them become more effective.
Yeah, Steven, you have such a wide diversity of experiences and such great depth as a chief people officer, and I think that's such a unique perspective because you are actually responsible for the people in very large organizations. You were internal. Sometimes consultants come from the outside, but you were internal. Tell us a little bit more about what that was like, being responsible for all of these people, especially such large organizations, because people are so different, and can really play a critical role in the success or failure of an organization. So what was that like, being responsible for them internally?
Well, when I was a chief people officer at a tech company, that was helping a company navigate rapid growth
Mm-hmm.
from less than 100 to well over 1,000 in a relatively short period of time, which is about 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really shepherding an organization through a cultural reinvention while also staying ahead of the curve technologically. And in doing so, part of our charge was embedding certain approaches into the company that would allow us to scale. And when I think of a couple of things that we did that helped people understand the importance of the role that they play in company success, one was a unique onboarding approach that we put in place, and one was a global leadership development experience that involved not kind of your typical high potential leadership development work, but it was really a diagonal slice of people who were in cohorts who
Mm-hmm.
worked together on a global basis to be more effective influencers and leaders,
Mm-hmm.
because we saw leadership not as a hierarchical process, but that everyone has to display leadership qualities to influence both across the organization, in their teams, and in the particular functional areas in the industries that they're a part of. In the
That's
sports
really
world,
interesting. So in that case, you see leadership as being everyone's responsibility, not just the CEOs.
yeah, I mean, look, leadership is a massive topic of conversation, but we looked at it in our world as leadership is a responsibility,
Mm.
whether it's to yourself, to the people you work with, to the customers, and in fact, we extended it into the community. So it was a question of how do you show up as a leader in your own unique way, and
Mm.
how do we help you strengthen, especially through the behavior influence, because we were such a flat organization at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that word. Leadership is a responsibility. I think that that's such an important concept to convey to people, because when they see it as a responsibility, they take ownership of it. So I love that approach.
And ironically, one of our two core values was ownership.
Mm.
So it was at the time new. Not everybody necessarily wants to be an owner. They want to be led. Sometimes people are at companies for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you might have had stock options and you were theoretically an owner, no,
Mm-hmm.
practically an owner, this was more about raising the bar of expectation of yourself, and with it, ways to help the company grow and scale.
Yeah, I love the way you put together, the leadership concept with influence, because a lot of times people think, if I'm a leader, then I have this authority and you have to do what I say because I'm the leader. But, by really introducing the concept of influence, I think that's really key to help leaders understand that they have to, get people on their side, not just tell people what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you bring that forward to the second chief people officer experience, that was in the world of sports. And
Mm-hmm.
I was the chief people officer of the global governing body of golf, an
Mm.
organization called the United States Golf Association. And so that's a whole nother world, right? And
Yeah.
so that's more team-centric leadership, because running national championships across 17 different categories, operating across a wide spectrum of associations that both execute on our mission at the time and also working internally. The focus was how do we operate effectively in a team construct
Mm-hmm.
and display leadership in a different way. And in that case, when I think about all the experiences being on the ground at major sport events and on a daily basis, having getting people to think about leaders in the moment, because your decision could help affect the not just the outcome of the event, but just the experience of the multiple hundreds of thousands of people that are there to experience it live.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, well, not ironically, but unfortunately, we also were operating that way in a remote basis when we were in the midst of COVID, and how
Mm.
we had to pivot in the way that we ran so that we could maintain the type of culture and values and systems to allow us to succeed in a very different environment that we all were participants in.
So what are you focusing on behaviorally in that different environment? Because you have the team environment, and then you also have the virtual environment. So what are you focusing on to help people behaviorally in that way?
Well, you know, it was certainly a journey. We were already a very distributed organization, so that was not that much of a stress. It had
Okay.
more to do with the pace in which we operated and the ability to look out into the future with such uncertainty and put a different lens to it. So, an organization that oversees a sport tends to have a very long view because a sport like golf is 600 years old. So,
Mm-hmm.
your thought is about, how do you maintain the future of a sport and the integrity that it represents? But here
Mm-hmm.
we were now in a different environment where teams needed to go back to zero and say, okay, let's try to look at what we're doing in sprints of 7, 30 days, and 90 days. And
Mm-hmm.
how do we ensure that we're delivering in the short term because everything was turned upside down? So the focus was on near term team performance and how does the team stay connected and aligned in a more controlled environment so they
Mm-hmm.
felt productive while they were also dealing with the natural tension of personal and professional, which we were all now, again, dealing with across the globe.
Yeah, so in that environment, you're really working with the team functioning and how they function together as a team in that environment. I want to ask you a little bit about how this translates to the work that you do with mergers and acquisitions, because I don't know much about that, but you mentioned that you work with the CEOs of the acquiring company, and then you also have to go and do a little bit of work with the company that's being acquired. How do you foster teamwork, between those two leading teams, because I imagine there has to be some teamwork there in order for this to go well.
Yeah, so let me just be clear. So the work that I do in private equity and what I was describing was when a private equity firm invests in a company
Mm-hmm.
that, depending upon the type of private equity firm, it could be a minority, majority, or maybe a complete buyout of a company. Each of those represent different levels of engagement. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the case of the firm that I work with, these deals could be majority or minority. And ultimately, these deals translate into how do we help an executive who maybe off of them are founder CEOs who built a company up until this point, and how do we help them reframe and re-engage both individually
Mm-hmm.
and for the team to be prepared to scale to the next level. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, what that requires is a refocus around team performance, doing specific team diagnostics to help the team relaunch, if you will, to get them set on a new path. And that path might involve rethinking the way they work,
Mm-hmm.
reprioritizing what they're doing, redefining what the norms are and the purpose of the team is. Recognizing that team health is very much part of the growth journey in an environment where, because of the investment thesis that a private equity firm places on a company because they're looking for a great opportunity for everyone involved, is rethinking how you show up. And the same thing applies obviously to the CEO, who him or herself now have to rethink, how do I do what I'm doing differently now that
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a new stage?
Yeah, so really helping them reframe their approach and change their perspective so that it matches the appropriate behavior. Do you have an example that illustrates this? This is such interesting stuff.
Sure. So let me give you two examples. So one team that I work with is a very successful team who operate in a really cutting edge area of technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an in depth team analysis, team diagnostic 360 on the founder CEO. The results were less than stellar, let's put it that way. And what we had to do and what we've been doing is resetting the team in a couple of ways. One is the team really never established healthy team processes and systems in the first place,
Hmm.
even to get to this point. And so in some ways, the team was successful in spite of the founder CEO.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
what we have to do is change that so that it's successful because of the CEO and the team's ability to perform at the next level.
Hmm.
And so we're on a journey to help them be more effective. On the other hand, is a CEO who is not a founder, who was put into a role 2 years ago when I started to work with this person, and working with this person hand in glove, but also working with a team that has also gone through a number of iterations of change around who's sitting at the table, has also been how does the team maintain and sustain its performance while new members have come into the system, if you will, while
Hmm.
also the CEO is growing as an independent CEO to a point now where the performance has far exceeded the original expectations. And as a result, the valuation of this company is significantly greater than where it was.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I love those examples. It illustrates to me the importance and the critical aspect of leadership in the success of the organization, but also the critical role that the team plays in supporting the leader and the organization. I'm wondering, Stephen, with your experience being the chief people officer in such large organizations, what has been your experience working with leaders who are either supportive of the people side of the work or may not appreciate it as much, and how do you bring them, how do you help them understand the value of focusing on the people?
Ernest, that's a battle that's happening every day right now in business. And frankly, that battle has not stopped and won't stop. So I think the earlier in my career when I worked in very large companies
Hmm.
and where making an impact was different every day because when you're dealing in larger organizations, you could be dealing with a team, a function, a business unit, everyone having different views on what is the impact of HR in my view of things that
Hmm.
may be disconnected from the larger company view,
Hmm.
and so that's always a challenge. I would say that a key moment for me that helped me be better at responding to what you just said was when I went to the advanced HR executive program that Dave Ulrich runs at University of Michigan. I did this many years ago in my career.
Hmm.
And Dave, who is one of the fathers of modern HR, um, essentially espoused a model and an approach, and very much of it was a business mindedness, outside in view of how to make an impact on the company and really what the purpose of HR is in the first place. And
Hmm.
that really helped shape my own mindset of look, across the continuum of all the companies I've been a part of, I am a business executive. I'm a leader in this company, and people, as both an investment and an asset, are what drive success. This is not about a cost and a liability.
Yeah.
And so, how do
Hmm.
we get the greatest return on investment in our assets? And let's reframe what we deem as necessary to run this company successfully. Sometimes that leads to decisions that people are happy about. Sometimes it doesn't. But those are the natures of running a growing company.
Yeah, I love what you've just said there. I agree wholeheartedly that the people are the most important resource of the organization, and I think leaders don't always appreciate that well enough, and do what needs to be done to support them to be successful. Stephen, I think your role and your experiences having worked in HR is so critical. Help us understand, how should we be looking at HR and executives and leaders and the function of HR, and how can we as leaders better support our HR colleagues? I think one of the things that I've learned to appreciate is the value of partnering with my HR executive colleagues, because they are so critical to the success of any work that we do.
Right. So the let's be clear that if you're in a for-profit environment,
Hmm.
an HR executive is there to help a company win at what it does. And it's winning by creating the right foundational programs and practices and processes that help a company get the most out of the people that it employs, however that defines inside a company. HR is very much about being a legitimately measured business function that creates value inside a company, while things like culture or inclusion and belonging are important elements. What's really important is capability and culture, and the ability to strengthen the capability of a company and obviously the people that make up the company, such that the company is able to navigate all the changes that it has to both respond to, or maybe it might be impacting. And with the world of artificial intelligence and the recognition that, truthfully, as companies pare down what they deem as the size of the company that's required to compete in today's world, many successful companies are realizing they can operate with less and create more diverse capability workforces through things like artificial intelligence. And so HR, if it really wants to make an impact and be respected, also needs to recognize you also have to be prescient and ahead of the learning curve around what does a successful workforce and a workplace look like going forward.
Yeah, that's such salient advice. I did a talk not too long ago about AI and HR, and talked about just how AI itself is even getting involved and having an impact on the work of HR, let alone the work of an organization, but just in HR itself, and just really helping HR leaders understand what that looks like and how they can take advantage of AI. So I really appreciate that. Steven, you have such great experience, and I would love to continue learning from you. And I think we're just going to have you come back and share some of these HR perspectives.
Sure.
But in the interest of time, how do people reach you? How do people get a hold of you if they want to continue the conversation or get your services?
Well, as you said, my practice is called Listen Forward, and that's listenforwardllc.com. My direct email is steve@listenforwardllc.com. If people want to reach me also, it's sschloss@edisonpartners.com as well. But happy to talk to CEOs or executives and executive teams who are looking to strengthen who they are and how they show up and how they make an impact. And happy to talk further about my background and experiences in the context of being more effective HR executives as well. And by chance, a couple of my clients are heads of HR in companies, so helping them as well.
Awesome. Now, Steve, I always want to ask our guests that come on, because they're such experts in their area of expertise, what's a tip that you can share with us for business leaders, organizations, especially in this volatile time that we're all in right now?
Well, I'd say the simplest, but sometimes the hardest thing for people is to be contextually aware of what's going on in the world around you. And that comes from a number of forms. It could be read about things that are going on in the world that maybe have nothing to do with business, but might have to do with politics or economics or social issues or climate, things that are interesting to you that you can bring into conversations so that you can make a greater impact, because you can bring context and perspective to whatever the discussion is at the moment. Because sometimes the greatest ideas come from things that are removed from what you're focused on, but it helps people visualize, but it also helps to reframe the conversations, which I think might be the single most behavior you can have right now, is both to listen and reframe things. And oftentimes you get that just by learning and staying as current as possible.
Yeah, I love that advice. I think it's really important for all of us to remain current on the things that are going on around us, because they all impact us and the people that we work with. So it's really important to do that. Steve, thanks so much for being on the show. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Ernest. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. We hope you will join us again next time.